As a lot of you know, recently I installed the HPI Diff mount in my C5 Corvette. I had heard over and over online that if you want to get rid of the drivetrain hop in these cars, that is the best way to do it. So it is a beautiful day today, and I decided why not put this thing to the test and see if it's actually as good as people say. So stay tuned. Well, I decided to start recording inside of the car right now because it is super windy today and I don't want you guys listening to wind noise the entire time. But we are in the cockpit of the C5 right now, and I am at a super special secret burnout location where it's totally legal to do skids and such. So we're going to put it to the test today. But before we start testing, I wanted to kind of go over the installation process for the HPI Diff mount. Obviously, in my video, it was a little bit different because I had the whole cradle dropped already. So installing it for me was just as easy as bolting it up. This guy is just going to mount up something like that. So the only thing that I ran into is with this guy, they have these countersunk holes, and the bolts that they provide fit in there very nicely, but there's no way to get a socket in there. So I can't figure out why that was done. Basically, I just got a washer to make it flush like that, and it'll just stick out the top and then mount to there. So I think that'll work just fine. And then at this point, now that it's mounted on there, basically what's gonna happen is you'll just take these guys off, and once we're ready to bring up our cross member, this will bolt into the cross member, and then we just bolt that up and torque it to spec. If you are doing this with the cradle in the car and everything still put together, it's going to look a little bit different. So the installation process for this starts with you unbolting the current diff mount from the cradle. At that point, you're going to jack up the transmission and differential assembly, and that's going to give you just enough room to unbolt the counterweight and then the current diff mount. After you have both of those off, then you're going to want to slide in the new HPI Diff mount, and that's going to be a little bit tricky. I've heard that it's a pretty tight fit, so you're going to have to massage some things and kind of wiggle it around, but just be patient and it'll fit up. And then after that, the installation for this is pretty much exactly what I did in my video. One thing that I ran into is with the mount, there's countersunk holes for the bolts to connect to the diff. And that is where I ran into a little bit of trouble because the countersunk holes there are just barely big enough for the bolt head to fit into, but you can't fit a socket in there. So what I ended up doing is I just put a washer on top of there, and then I put the bolt in after that. You're not going to get quite as much thread engagement with that, but you know, really, I don't think it's a huge deal. It seems like it's been working fine, so that's the only complaint that I have with the entire kit. Now, as far as drivability, you're not going to have a huge change between this mount and the OEM mount. Around 3,000 RPMs, you're going to notice there's a little bit more vibration for sure, but it's not a huge deal. I really don't mind it too much. And again, if you're going to stiffen up anything in the drivetrain, guys, this is going to cause vibrations. That's just the name of the game. So really, to me, the trade-off is not a huge deal. There's the HPI Diff mount. It is much larger than the OEM mount. It's a little hard to see because of all the wiring and the brake lines, but that's how it's going to look. So let's start testing it. Well, that is genuinely a night and day difference. I know I didn't show you guys a before video of just how much wheel hop it had before, but take my word for it when I tell you that every time I launched the car, it felt like this thing was going to shake apart. My friend Ryan was behind me at the track, and he said that every time I launched it, it looked so aggressive. So I decided to just start rolling into it instead. and that really reduced the amount of wheel hop that I had, but I just really wanted to save my rear end and my input shaft, so that was much more kind. But now that I've got this mount, I don't have that worry anymore. Just based on my experience with it so far, I would highly recommend the HPI Diff mount to reduce your drivetrain hop. Right now, there is just a little bit of hop still present, but I think that if I aired up my rear tires just a little bit more, I could reduce it even further. But there you have it. That's my honest review of the HPI Diff mount that I recently installed in my C5 Corvette. If you installed this mount in your C5, let me know in the comments below and tell people exactly what you think about it. But that's all for this week, guys. If you enjoyed the content for today, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future content. I'll catch you guys next week. Later.